Real quick, I want to tell you about something I built for you. May 14th, New York City, the Wealth Catalyst Summit. One day, 140 women who are serious about what they do with their money. Executives, founders, investors in the same room having the kinds of conversations that just don't happen anywhere else. Private markets, real estate, how to get on boards, how to buy a business, how to make your capital actually reflect what you believe. If you've been listening to the show, you already know that this is your room. Seats are limited, and we are coming up on this event May 14th. So register today at wealthcatalyst.com. Link is in the show notes. Women don't talk about money the way we should. Not honestly, not openly, and not with each other. But that's changing. I'm Syama Bunten, founder of Wealth Catalyst. And getting rich together is where the conversation lives. Every week, a different woman, a different path, and a conversation that will change how you think about your own financial power. This community is growing and you belong in it. Please subscribe so you never miss an episode and leave us a 5-star review so more women can find their way here. Now, let's get rich together. Friends, today I believe we are living through the Great Wealth Enlightenment. Yes, we've been hearing in all the reports about what's happening with women and wealth, that we are living through a great wealth transfer. But let me tell you that this transfer is simply one half of a much larger and more provocative moment that we are in. We know now that $30 trillion will be in the hands of women by 2030. Ladies, that's 4 years from now. $30 trillion of ownership. That ownership of capital is not just made up of a transference from spouses or a transference from intergenerations. That ownership is also comprised of decades of overturned rules and regulations that have allowed women to build wealth, build businesses, get credit cards. That time, that maturation, it's unprecedented. This moment simply could not have happened before. Now, the great wealth transfer is super important to acknowledge. It is said to us, and the number keeps growing, that by 2048, there will be $86 trillion that passes into the hands of women. Think about that along the side of many of us who are not inheritors, who have now been able to build businesses, become the first in our families to go to college, pay off our student loan, be able to have multiple homes, to be able to be thriving capital allocators. We are looking, my friends, at a moment in history that is an accelerating curve. Women have never before been in this sort of financial position. And it is so critical that we take a moment to decide for ourselves how we are going to engage with it. It's interesting to think that these days, so many more women are able to become CEOs, board directors. We're in such strong positions of leadership now, more than ever before. We have fought so hard and our LinkedIn profiles are so impressive. And yet, just because you run a $100 million P&L doesn't mean that you feel confident about your financial life. It doesn't mean that you're living your life to your values or that you even know what they are. And so this moment, this great wealth enlightenment is calling forward to us to look at not just how much money we have control and ownership for, but what our stewardship strategy is, what's important to us, what is the future of the world that each of us wants to believe in, that we want to build towards. That, my friends, is the most important thing, because the capital that just sits there, that sits into the hands of legacy portfolios, ends up supporting visions of the past, right? It ends up supporting someone else's dreams. And when we have that opportunity to take that capital and say, what is important to me? What do I believe in? What is the innovation of the future? And then how can I marry that money that I do have control and responsibility over to that vision of the world I want to create? How can I then stand in contribution and see that become a reality? Now, when we think about the women who are in control of this capital, when I think of myself, when I started this journey and I was thinking about my own assets, Many of you know this, but I sent an email out to 50 girlfriends. I was running my very first business, was going through a divorce, and I said, hey guys, what are you doing with your money? How are you thinking about investing it? Up until that point, I knew how to run a successful cash flowing company. I knew how to buy a house. I knew how to invest in a 401k, but no one had shown me possibilities. It wasn't that I didn't know math, and it wasn't that I didn't have access to information. What I was missing was modeling. What I was missing were the right examples. And what I would later come to find, the women who I was seeking to be around would be called wealth expanders. And those would be women who are sharing the things that they're doing, not such that it would be some prescriptive thing that I would necessarily follow them. And I didn't need how to's. I wanted to see possibility. And I wanted to know what maybe was right for me in this moment, what maybe could be right for me in 10 years. And maybe something I didn't want to do because that strategy or what that supported wasn't something that mattered to me. But I wanted to have that choice. As I was going through my process of looking for wealth expanders and trying to find the right rooms to be in, I'd often find myself in rooms where it felt like people were trying to take my money away from me. Wealth managers looking to increase their assets under management, startup founders or fund managers looking for me to invest in whatever the latest thing was that they were building and activating towards. And I, out of a sense of FOMO and feeling like I should know better, ended up making investments early on that weren't necessarily well thought out. I certainly didn't want to miss the boat on doing the smart thing or the right thing with my money. And I also didn't want it to do nothing. But I didn't find a place or know where to go to see optionality, to see context. Had I realized that different sort of investments were going to give me different kinds of exit multiples over different time frames, that some investments were smarter to invest in with a higher minimum and it would take longer to exit, but it would be safer capital relative to other things I wanted to invest in, I probably would have done it a little bit differently. But what I realized is that I didn't have a lack of access to information. It was really the modeling. Now, Bank of America tells us that 94% of women fully expect to take financial ownership over their life at some point in time. I'll tell you what, when I went through my divorce, there were so many moments where I was scared, I was confused. I didn't know what my values were when it came to what to do with my money and my energy. And I knew that even though I was part of that 94%, I was also part of the 72% of women who did not feel confident. Now let that land. If 94% of us expect to be fully financially on our own, and only 28% of us feel confident exercising that capital, that means that there's a huge delta. It means that there's something that is glaring in the room here, which is we need a place to be able to learn and feel confident enough to be able to make financial decisions for our future. Now, I stand here today not as a product of someone who's going to inherit a lot from my family. I stand here as someone who's been the first in my family, someone who has taken the risk. At one of our DC salons, gosh, this brave woman stood up and she said, it's such a misnomer that women are risk averse. Divorce is one of the riskiest things that a woman can do. And I did that. And guess what? She did it while pregnant, while starting a new business, while being part of an accelerator. Her business has since received a tremendous amount of funding. Her business is exploding. It's so exciting. But this idea that we are somehow risk averse when we are making lifestyle choices that put us in the most riskiest categories is so disheartening. I recently read that 70% of divorces are initiated by women. It's wild because also at that same time, 41% of us will experience severe setbacks financially as a result of that. That means that we are taking risks. We are moving forward to do what's best for ourselves, and we are willing to do things that others won't in order to create the life that we want. And so this idea of capital agency, this idea of how we build to our future, To me, this is a moment of self-responsibility. We can no longer look to others as being experts to tell us what to do. Our future is in our own hands. And it's not simply just a matter of saying, hey, I'm just not going to think about this because I'm not a financial person, or I'm going to leave that to someone else. There are so many ways today to become capitally active, to be able to do things with your money, that it is not a moment to say, this is too hard. In fact, this is a moment where we get an opportunity to rise up and say, hey, what's available for me to make that decision? Now, I'm not saying everyone here needs to become a wealth manager or wealth advisor. I'm certainly not, and I have no intention on being that person. But what I am interested in is learning from my friends. Over the last 7 years, I have spoken to hundreds of women. And it's so fascinating because many of us have built very successful careers, business owners. Many of us have had great corporate careers, founders, exits, all sorts of backgrounds. And it's so interesting because we think that there is some sort of need for us to then have to learn everything in order to be successful. We've just simply been operating in silos so that we can achieve success in a particular way. But I believe the way the pie gets bigger is when we don't see the areas that we've built out as being weaknesses. When we see what we've built and say, you know what, I can stand in my greatness and say, you know what, I have worked darn hard for this LinkedIn profile. I have worked so hard to be where I am today. And I'm not dead. I'm curious. There's more to my life here. There's more that I can create. There's something that is exciting, and there's a vision that this human being wants to see in the world, and I can actually do something about it. And that, I think, is extremely, extremely powerful. Over the last 7 years, the women I've spoken to, the successful women, it is tough out there, ladies. A lot of women don't want to share their successes because they don't want others to feel bad. And it's difficult to share struggles because we don't want to look bad. So where do we go? What do we do when we want to learn and be more? We want to be respected. We want to feel like a peer and that we're honored for what we know. We need to be in rooms where we can be both teacher and student, where we can actually say, I have something to contribute and I have things I want to learn. We move away from the prescriptive philosophies and how we've been marketed, all of these things that should be our dreams. I'm so tired of being told, hey, if you want to make a difference, you need to do this particular thing. You need to move your money in this particular area, or you need to be the one who's going to change this particular statistic. I'm tired of that. My values are unique and they've changed over time. When I was a young girl living in San Francisco and moved to New York City and my gosh, lived in the tiniest apartments you ever would have thought imaginable, slept on a futon with one of my girlfriends for the first few months so that I could figure out where I was going to live. My values were different. I was looking to establish myself. I was looking to find the right place for me to be able to discover who I am and who I was at that time. And then when I moved from New York to LA, started my first business, got married, my values changed again. I went from being so desired to be this corporate success. And if you would have asked me at the time, guys, I would have said, man, I would love to be the CEO of Gucci one day. And then all of a sudden I was like, you know what? I actually really want to be the CEO and founder of my own business. And you know what? My entire life shifted and changed. I reoriented. I used my money differently, my time differently. I changed. My values changed. As a result, my friend group changed. What I needed changed. When I got married, also, my life changed. Values changed. When I got divorced, I changed again. I'm now remarried. Guess what? I now have 3 stepkids. My life is totally different and far grander and more amazing and also more challenging in ways that I ever could have imagined. And guess what? My values have shifted. In order to meet the moment of seeing my potential on this planet, I have to be willing to let go of who I think I am for that which I want to be. I have to know that my identity isn't tied to one person, to one investment, to one company, to one thing, to one moment. But my identity is evolving and shaping as I receive new information about who I am in the world around me. I used to tell my girlfriends who would date, it's really funny. I used to say, ladies, would you take advice from an 18-year-old? And they'd say, no, I would never take advice from an 18-year-old. And then I'd say, well, why are you taking advice from your 18-year-old self? And the same goes with how you operate everything else. What I believe to be as a sign of intelligence is our ability to receive new information and make different choices. That is intelligent. New information leads to a better understanding of who we are. It allows us to reconcile the changes in our lives, to step into something greater, and to be willing to see the full potential of who we are. In a society and in a day and age when humans and when we are being faced with our own redundancy, this brings up so many big issues around mortality. Who are we? What's the point? What are we here to do? Well, I'll tell you what, using your capital, this money that you have worked so hard for, this money that you are responsible for stewarding, it doesn't matter how you got the money, ladies. At the end of the day, you have a powerful and important role to play in shaping the future. The companies that are going to be successful and on the stock market in the next 20 years are being funded today. What's scary to see is in facing the lack of liquidity in the market today, not understanding what's going to happen with IPOs, startups holding on to their capital and deciding to stay private longer. We simply just cannot rest on the old strategies. We can't just pick a lane and stick to it and know that eventually over time it works out. In fact, we are forced to diversify if we want to accept this new information, which is that the world is changing. Now, to be in a room of peers and women who have been building in different silos, who are experts in their space, who have lived experiences, is powerful, because the more that I can be around women who are in their zone of genius, who are building and who are seeing a future, the more I can see and double down on who I am and present my own contributions to the world. The less I need to be like them, the more I get to be like me. And in each of us standing in our greatness, we get to rest and rely on each other. We don't have to be each other. I'm really excited about the conversations that I've been having lately in these salons across the country. After doing our summits last year in New York and San Francisco, I had a really strong epiphany, which is that when we stay in our silos, we only get the same information circulating in the silo. A big part of the salon tour this year was to go and meet and see new women, to get to know what they're thinking and feeling, how they're building, what their universe looks like. And let me tell you, each market is a different universe. And together, when these universes collide, we get to truly see what it looks like to have exponential growth. The women in Nashville are focused on different problems and sectors than the women I met in Atlanta. The women in Atlanta are doing different things than the women in Philadelphia and Boston. Commonalities, yes, all of us looking to create a future, all of us looking to double down on the things that we want to contribute into this world, and all of us willing to go there. But our expertise, our opportunities, our access, they're all different. And a big part of what we were doing on this salon tour was holding signal to say, this is a new moment. This is a new time. This is a conversation where we get to be with peers and talk about the creative ways in which we are building, deploying, and preserving our capital. And we get to learn from each other, and we get to be teacher and student. This new way of thinking is radical. It goes against traditional models of how we think about using experts and relying our decisions on experts. I got to tell you, experts are incredible. We need experts. We need them to deploy and execute on our behalf. But our values and our decision points have to come from us triangulating both the information and also leveraging this gift of our inner compass as to what it is that feels right, what is in alignment. And that is what I believe makes the Great Wealth Enlightenment a very different story than simply a transfer of wealth. Women are stewarding more capital, both as a result of inheritance and of earning this capital. In combination with our values and the world that we want to see, we are shifting the rules of what it looks like for the financial world to work with and serve women. We have a greater vision. And that is something that I think is so incredible to unfold and to be a part of. And so these salon tours are here to say, ladies, there's a great wealth enlightenment, and there are rooms where women across the country are coming together to get to know each other, to build trust. And that trust, well, it often leads to transactions. It leads to new investments. It leads to new philanthropic initiatives. It leads to new businesses, new partnerships, because trust is what it really relies upon. Real quick, I want to tell you about something I built for you. May 14th, New York City, the Wealth Catalyst Summit. One day, 140 women who are serious about what they do with their money. Executives, founders, investors in the same room having the kinds of conversations that just don't happen anywhere else. Private markets, real estate, how to get on boards, how to buy a business, how to make your capital actually reflect what you believe. If you've been listening to this show, you already know that this is your room. Seats are limited, and we are coming up on this event May 14th. So register today at wealthcatalyst.com. Link is in the show notes. Now, back to the conversation. Now, everyone who's like, hey, that golf course, and what about that golf course? Well, we have a different way of doing things, a different way of developing that trust. And part of that is not ascribing to something that is someone else's mantra. It's not a set of words that we all need to adhere to. This comes from following who you are. This comes from following your own guidance. It comes from trusting yourself. I was sharing with someone earlier today that, about a year ago, I was walking down the aisle of a bookshelf and a really great little independent bookstore. And gosh, I used to in the past just love the self-help stuff, like, oh, let me improve on myself. I was that person, by the way, during COVID who was like, oh yeah, I'm going to get another degree, so I'm that person. But as I was walking down this bookshelf, the self-help section, I looked around and I said, you know what? I think I'm okay. I think I'm okay right now. I don't think I need anything else or anyone else to tell me what to do to fix myself. I think I've figured some things out. And that is valuable. When I walk into these salons and I ask women to talk to me about money, women will tell you, and most of them do, they'll say the 1,000 things that they did wrong. They'll say things like, oh, I missed this opportunity. I'm a bad negotiator. Don't ask me about money. I don't pay much attention to it. I have someone who does that for me. Most of it is just, nonsense. And maybe sometimes there are some real mistakes. But what they fail to tell you are the million things that they did right. The student loans they paid off, the philanthropic donations, the home that they bought, the caring parent that they took care of, the aging parent that they took care of, the kids that they raised on their own, the college educations that they put together, the gifts and acts of kindness and generosity that they did with their money. My gosh, and even the ability for them to fuel industries. We don't often talk about our wins and our successes. We're simply not socialized to do that. And it's a real shame because if more of us realize just how okay we truly are, how much we've really done and accomplished, we would then realize that that gap, that 72% gap that's telling us that we can't do it, that lack of confidence is really a bunch of BS because the entire time we've been taking care of ourselves, right? Like we know how to do this. It's okay that we don't know everything. We're not supposed to. And in the spaces that we get to come together under the thesis of, hey, like, let's stand in our greatness. Let's lean on each other. Let's support each other and learn from each other. And let's do that about money because money is one of the most important relationships, my friends, that you will ever have on this planet. You're born with a relationship to money. You will die with a relationship to money. You certainly can't take it with you, but it dictates so much of your lived experience that the fact that you don't want to talk about it or can't, or maybe haven't until now, is something that we get to look at together. You know, there's so many great authors and women out there who are talking about money stories and how to reconcile. You know, two of my favorites, Emily Scott, she has an incredible private practice around money stories. The incredible Marcia Dawood with her book around unapologetic wealth and understanding your own money stories and rewriting it. There is a whole industry that's out there to help us get to better know ourselves. Because if we can't understand the behavioral patterns of our parents, maybe how that impacted us, it's going to be hard to step away from it. My own relationship with money has been really interesting. I'm sure all of ours has been. But, I grew up with really mixed messages. I grew up around messages of you got to work hard to make a lot of money and have as much of it as you can. And then also people who have lots of money are bad people. I grew up with that. That's kind of confusing. I grew up over indexing on needing to be intelligent and earnership, but not about independence and stability. Our parents are simply doing the best that they can with what they have and what they've inherited as mindsets from their generations before. But we have an ability to help ourselves. And that is what I mean by self-responsibility. We no longer live in an era where we can look to others and assume that they know what's best. We can't even always look to our doctors. A couple years ago, I gained a tremendous amount of weight in a short period of time. Gained about 30 pounds in a year. I told my doctor and he said, well, your numbers are coming out okay. And I said, yes, but this is simply like not right. I know this for myself. This is not right. And he didn't listen. He said, you're fine. You're fine. Tell me when you have symptoms. Well, this is a symptom. I had to go to peers. I had to say, hey guys, I am experiencing this tremendous amount of weight gain. Can someone tell me what insight or information or who to talk to? And it was my peers who said, hey, I actually know somebody who you should have a conversation with. And that woman said, hey, you should get these specific numbers checked out. And guess what? I got one of my test results back. And where the high on the test result, it goes from 0 to 9, my number was at 100. All right. My doctor, my GP never would have known that had I not taken the impetus on myself, the self-responsibility to know that. And so I equate this to our money because it's quite similar. You can hire and have the best people in your court, but unless you are doing a little bit more of the digging, unless you have friends you can talk to and resources and places where you're like, hey, what is going on here? You just simply may not know, right? Like, it's not necessarily your fault. I mean, geez, I didn't go to school to become a doctor. How was I supposed to know, what the specific test was? But our society just isn't built this way. So, my friends, I'm honored to be able to share a little bit of this perspective, a little bit of how I think the pie gets bigger, of how you doubling down on you is the key to the magic here. And being with peers is the key to unlocking the next stages of growth. We had in one of our community meetings recently, we had someone with a conversation around private credit, specifically in climate. And it's interesting because, the way that I run and operate everything is not expert driven. There are no presentations and slideshows and things like that. It's very much like, hey, let's have an intelligent conversation about something that we possibly want to know more about. And it was so cool. I knew nothing about how private credit operated before that. I didn't even know how to access that. I didn't know what the different sectors were. All I knew was that the New York Times and every other publication was telling me that private credit's going down and this is a bad sector and, this is the next thing to topple. But that's simply just a headline. There's no context there. How am I supposed to make an informed decision based on a headline? And when you go and talk to a wealth manager, for example, and your advisor, they might say, hey, you should keep your, assets under management in this portfolio because it's safer. They have no idea what your risk tolerance is for who you are. They know what your risk tolerance is based on standards and based on a set of frameworks, and they have your best intention at heart. But when you ask them to take money out to go invest in a private deal, it's their job to be risk averse for you. They're looking out for you. It's like asking your mom if you should go do something that's risky. She's probably going to say no. And if you want to be able to take that risk, you might have to push for it, right? You might have to do it yourself. So, this private credit thing was so cool because at the end, everyone was like, wow, I had no idea that this is how it worked, that these were the minimums to invest, that this is how I can participate and how to context this between something like, let's say, venture capital or other kinds of private equity. So my friends, all of that to say, you're okay. Getting rich together exists to help us realize that we're not ahead, we're not behind. You and I are tracking to the right pace of our own story of our life. And guess what? Just like you have friends you talk to about dating or relationships, you get to also have friends to talk to about money. And you get to have places to go to where you can talk about things and ask questions and be honored for who you are. And that is my passion, my gift, and what I am here to do. I have no desire to tell you what to do. I want to help you see possibilities so that I can see possibilities. I want to hear your story so I can see myself in you, so that others can see themselves in you, such that we can recognize that together we create the world of our own individual dreams. And we get to rely on each other to do that. So that is my invitation. I am honored to have spent the last few minutes with you, waxing poetic on thoughts and ideas. I am so looking forward to meeting so many more of you at these salons across the country, to give you a big hug, to say, yeah, lady, like you doing it. And for you to be like, hey, Syama, you're doing it too, right? Like we get to do that for each other. And these summits this year, my gosh, so amazing. I mean, the New York Summit coming together is so cool. We've got the New York Summit coming together is just so cool. We've got Cindy Gallup, Fran Hauser, Kim Weilman, Claire Chung, all talking about what it's like to build businesses in your 40s and 50s and 60s, right? It's like at 40, you're not done yet. There's like so much more you can be building and doing. And guess what? All the stats show it that building businesses at a later age have such a competitive advantage. We've got conversations on entrepreneurship through acquisition, because not everyone wants to go 0 to 1, right? Sometimes you want to just buy the damn thing and then be able to build it and run it and grow it. Conversations around some sexy topics like investing in women's health, investing in women's sports. One of the things I'm super interested in, one of my dear friends, Rima Khan, is going to talk about deep technology and space and what that looks like. So amazing. And then also building a giving strategy. What does it look like to think about intentionality? I wrote a couple Substacks last year about this thing that I was experimenting with, and it was daily giving. And every day, and did it for about 4 months. Every day, I gave some money on a direct giving on GoFundMe. And I would go on GoFundMe and I'd find someone who was fundraising for something that was important to them. And I was like, you know what? I want to see what it feels like to give to people that I feel called to give to. And it felt amazing. And then this year, I've developed a new strategy. What are the few things that I really want to support and make change in? We get to decide how to deploy change in the world and what that looks like. We also get to learn what it's like to take our 401k and, what it looks like to take our IRAs and our DAF accounts and do private market investing, because that's also available to us. So the summit is so cool because the conversations really touch so many different aspects of your life and what you're building and what is possible for you. I'm also excited at the summit that we do, it's so cool. We do these peer matches because being able to be teacher and student is so important. And being able to be a teacher and a student across topics like divorce, hedge funds, multifamily homes, buying single family homes, thinking about venture capital, thinking about entrepreneurship, thinking about sending kids to college. Money touches so many different areas of our life, and the incredible women who are attendees at the summit get matched so that they can be teacher and student, which is so brilliant. And then the last thing that I love so much is what it looks like when we start to think about more in-depth Q&As. Most conferences we go to, there's 5-minute Q&A and someone asks maybe 10 minutes worth of questions and everything kind of starts to fall apart with the timeline and the schedule. But what we do is a little bit different. After the summit, we invite our community members to do extended Q&As with our speakers. Spend an hour. It's a bunch of us on a call. We can just ask questions. That way you get a chance to actually ask the person who you want to have a conversation with the question you want. And maybe it goes in more depth and maybe it's a little bit longer, but you have the time and space. Friends, I've built a room that I've been looking for the last 7 years. And I continue to build it and shape it based on something that is divinely led inside of me. I feel honored. I feel a great sense of gratitude to be able to build this vision with so many incredible women and allies around me. This is a powerful moment. This is an accelerating curve. We need one another more now than ever. We need to embrace our differences. We need to embrace our values. We need to embrace our own change. And we get to hold each other in the evolutions of who we are. I hope to see you at our summit this year. I hope to be able to give you a big hug, and I hope to be able to continue on this journey of getting rich together. Thank you. Thank you for listening. This is the conversation we come back to every single week. Real women, real wealth, and what becomes possible when we stop being silent about money. If today's episode moved you, don't let it stop here. Wealth Catalyst is where women go to take it further. Our Freedom Tour salons are gathering women in 32 cities this year. Intimate evenings in homes and private spaces where women talk honestly about money, risk, and what they're building. And if you're ready to go even bigger, join us at the Wealth Catalyst Summit, a full-day event in New York City this May and San Francisco this October. Find your city and claim your seat at wealthcatalyst.com. We'll see you there.